chair of the school committee with a full vote. And what I did in that case was something that mayors had not done, which was get fully involved in as Suzanne has said, policy, budget, and in essence reviewing the superintendent when it was appropriate. But the key to move our society forward, as Pat indicated, and our democracy depends on it, is a quality public education. And right now, we give it to 2/3 of the kids in this country. Maybe we give it to 55% of the kids in this country, and maybe it's as low as 50%. But if we ignore the other percentage, whatever it might be in the locality, we are literally dooming the future generations to an unsustainable democracy and certainly not sustainable cities. So it seems to me, why is it great for lawyers to be involved in public service? We're all problem solvers. We all can get to the nub of an issue very quickly. And we all understand that it is much better to settle an issue out, understanding the terms of the settlement, than it is to roll the dice and see what happens next. Now when it's black and white, you gotta go and you have to say, we'll take our chance. But in all cases, bringing people around the table and discussing it and finding out what the key issue is and how do we find a way to work together is something that lawyers do like nobody else. So that, and how do you run? Running is pretty darn simple. You speak your mind. You don't get involved in tangling your feet around. Say it and mean it. You need visibility. The idea, someone said to me, well, I can't raise the money. Don't worry about the money. That's the other thing. The industry, and when I started, it wasn't as an industry, and now it is an industry from the standpoint of politics. You need bumper stickers to start. You get out bumper stickers, the rest will happen pretty quickly. Before you put your bumper sticker out, though, sit down and write a comprehensive position on each issue that you believe in, and understand that it is a working, living document. But understand that if you lay out your core values, pretty quickly you'll develop the kind of machine that Suzanne did here, where next thing you know, you're beating a 30-year incumbent. People want change. People want positive change, and they want to be involved. And lawyers can do that, I think. So thank you very much, Kay, for asking me to be here today.
Last but not least. Good morning. Thank you all for being with us. So I'll try to echo a couple of themes. I think for me, was very personal. I had never really planned to run for the school board, but my connection to public education is a story that's not obvious by looking at me, which is I am the children of immigrants, first generation. My parents were Holocaust survivors who came from Romania shortly before I was born, spoke no English at all, were penniless. I was one of those kids who brought home the teacher's notes and had to translate them for my parents. And they came with the hope that public education would open doors for their kids and give them opportunities. And I felt I was the living embodiment of that, like so many of us in this country. And it really was about giving back and about speaking up for public education at a time when the national conversation is quite critical of public education. And if you really believe, and if you've been the beneficiary, it does behoove you to get involved, as Scott said, in some way. My background as a lawyer sort of brought me here somewhat circuitously. I always knew that I wanted to work with kids. When I finished law school, I did represent kids in abuse and neglect cases and in juvenile delinquency cases in Newark, New Jersey. In that kind of practice, it's all about education, because until you can anchor kids back into consistent and comprehensive educational opportunity, they don't really have a fighting chance against some of the odds that they're facing. So I was always very conscious in my practice of the need to connect kids to educational opportunities. I had several opportunities as a lawyer. I worked both in what was then the public defender's office doing these delinquency cases and would work in abuse and neglect cases as well. I had an opportunity to work in New Jersey, the Association for Children of New Jersey, which was like a state-level children's defense fund. On my journey, I went to Cornell Law School and started their first child advocacy clinic for them and supervised students actually representing youth while they were in law school, which is what kept me inspired as a law student. I started doing a child advocacy clinic in my first semester in law school and didn't stop till I graduated. Had an opportunity to do that. When we moved to the DC area, my family moved, I ended up actually teaching a domestic violence clinic in Washington, DC, and there was so much overlap in the families between kids who were growing up in the abuse system and women who were the victims of violence, so it felt very natural. And then somewhere along the line, I stopped practicing law. When my youngest child was born, I decided I wanted to teaching. And I got a degree in special education. And for me, some of the connection was that for kids in the special education system, as Suzanne said, don't often get the attention that they deserve. And I felt like if I was going to put my effort into some teaching, I was really going to focus on this population. And I will say that the perspective of serving students and developing individualized educational plans for students in special education was really almost a perfect lens as a board member, because I am on the Board of Education in Montgomery County, Maryland. We have 146,000 students, 200 schools, and a $2 billion operating budget. It is clearly a bureaucracy. And you will get lost if you don't remember that it's really about every individual student in that system, and that every one of them matters. And you know, our success rate, we have terrific numbers to be proud of. We graduate 90% of our students. Who does that leave behind? And so that focus on representing kids, understanding the important value of education, looking at things from an individual perspective, really served me coming on the Board of Education. And while I had never planned it, I would say in Montgomery County, and maybe this is true in other places, the people who tend to run for the Board of Education are actually people who tend to get involved in their local PTAs. It is starting to get involved on behalf of your kids. I never had as much interest in sort of the selling the wrapping paper or the doing the school fair, but I got really interested in how a system as big as ours made decisions about its budget, made decisions about its policies. Now, as you've heard, that's the bread and butter of what school boards do. And you watch long enough, and with a legal background, you start to ask enough questions, you start to think, you know what, I'd like to be part of the solution. I'd like to offer my services, I'd like to give back, I'd like to help. Running in Montgomery County is a little bit daunting. We're a county of 1 million citizens. Every member of the Board of Education runs countywide. So that's a big job, and it's a big job that very few people are paying attention to, because interestingly, the way the cycle works, our General Assembly at our state level, our local county council, and 4 members of our Board of Education are all in the gubernatorial election cycle. So everybody's running, every other election gets attention rather than this one. What worked for me was to say, you know, this is about grassroots. That's what people think about. Board of Education races are nonpartisan in Montgomery County, Maryland. And what I set out to do to educate myself before I made the decision was to reach out to community leaders from all different aspects of the community, because we are a large and diverse community. And we had sort of a strategy, my kitchen cabinet, my friends, that I would try to have lunch with anybody who would bring along 100 votes. If you were a decision maker in your community, if you were the head of the NAACP, if you were the head of the Asian American Parents Association, if you were a business person, if you were on our chamber, chances are the night before the election, people are going to call you and say, you know what, just tell me who to vote for Board of Education, because I have paid no attention. So I decided the way that this was going to work was I would meet those people, and it gave me 2 advantages. Number 1, they had a face-to-face. Number 2, I actually started by saying to them, what do you think we should be doing about education in Montgomery County? So I learned, I broadened my own perspective. I made it a goal to try and visit as many schools as I could, because Montgomery County is a very diverse county. We are an urban, suburban, and rural school district all together. In fact, we say to folks, if you took the entire District of Columbia public school system, spread it along where we live, the 270 corridor, surrounded it by a suburban affluent school system, and then threw in some rural schools up at the northwestern corner of the county, that is Montgomery County. We can belong to urban schools associations because we have all the problems of our urban schools. We can belong to suburban schools. And I needed to get out of my home school to get a good perspective. So we have about 200 schools. I probably visited about 75 when I was running, because I really felt like I needed to have more of a sense of what the community was like. It was certainly no guarantee. The first time that I ran, I was fortunate to be elected, but as folks have said, you have to start by being ready to answer, why are you doing this? Because people will ask you, and they should ask you right away. And you need to be really grounded in yourself in terms of why you want to do it. And I agree with everything everyone said, that it's got to be a passion and a love. I've told you about how big our county is. One other thing about Montgomery County that I am proud of is that though we're a successful school system for the most part, we certainly still do have achievement gaps. One thing that our school system has done is commit to speaking very openly about the problems. So in our vernacular, we say we have put race on the table in Montgomery County. And that manifests itself in a couple of ways. Number 1, the last time I served as board president, when we readopted our core values, we just put up as number 1 on behalf of the school board that success shall not be predictable by race and ethnicity. Just put it out there. That's our number 1 core value. How you get there, it's not easy. It's not a magic solution, but you have to at least be willing to say this is a very important commitment, because in a county like Montgomery County, one advantage of having a countywide school system, is the board before me, so I brag on them, this is not on me personally, made a decision that we were going to allocate resources to need. Not every school was getting the exact same number of dollars because not every school had a population that needed the exact same things. We identified focus schools. We identified that there were about 60 schools in the county where the students accounted for 75% of the poverty in the county. And those schools started to get more and different. They had different dollars allocated to them for teachers, different dollars allocated for class size. So that was one thing that the school system did. There has been now a book written about Montgomery County called Leading for Equity. If this is something you're interested in, I encourage you to look it up because it really talks about how to take this journey. And with that, I'll stop and look forward to being able to answer any questions you have.
So I just want to start and have a laser-like focus on what can attorneys bring to the table that other candidates cannot. I can start with Suzanne.
Sure. I think one thing that I think many attorneys have thick skins, and that's really important because I think being on a school committee or school board, you're really in the thick of it. I remember reading Jimmy Carter's autobiography, and I believe he was on his local school board, and he said that was like one thing that really prepared him for the presidency, because you're in the thick of it. You would go, I know it because our district was probably one of the smaller ones here represented. I would go to my son's athletic games, baseball or soccer, or their music performances, and there'd be other parents there. And they would be, there are no boundaries. They would talk to you at any time, at any place about issues in the school. You have to be prepared to talk about them. And you get a lot of heat from some of the decisions. I know our local school committee meetings are televised. So, and people watch them, and they see the decisions that you make, and the decisions are immediate, and they challenge you on those decisions. And I think lawyers are good at defending their positions, and also bringing some common sense into why I voted a particular way, and what that'll do not only for their child, but for the whole system. So I think that's one thing.
I'll just go down the line.
Yeah, I think that perhaps the best assets or attributes that I bring to this process is some training in advocacy. It's really important to be able to articulate a position in support of public education. And the other thing is that because I have some regular dealings in the political and business community, it offers me an opportunity for more access, so I'm perfectly comfortable going to a state legislator and, in effect, advocating on behalf of public education or a public education position. Because I also serve on my state school board, I have more opportunities to do that, and I think that because I understand the laws that are there supporting and defining education, both from the perspective of law and regulation, I think that lends to me an additional asset that is very helpful and valuable in the public education process, in the course of advocating for education. And there's an awful lot, by the way, that provides a foundation if you want to move on and become more involved at the state or national level. By having that legal training, you have, I would say, perhaps a head start, if you will, on understanding how things happen in your state legislature or in Congress, and so you can go there with a little more confidence in how to get something accomplished.
In addition to the things that have been said, I would say having an understanding and a commitment to process when you're trying to make change at a systemic level. It can't just be ad hoc. You have to be able to see that there've got to be sort of rules, it's got to be fair, it's got to work, and if it works for one person, it's got to work for everyone. So I felt like my legal training has certainly served me in that capacity. And I think also understanding that, public education is an anchor in a community. And so you can make decisions at the board level, and there are administrators and teachers who have to follow, but you do have to bring the community along. And so the advocacy piece and the ability to be persuasive, to be reasoned in the decisions that you make, and to be able to speak clearly